Zig coming in on top. Today on the show we have Joe Adducci from Sold American. Joe is a singer-songwriter, bass player. On the show, we were supposed to be joined by the whole band, Joe and Chris, but Joe told me this.
Well, actually, Chris was having this one breakthrough on something he's been working on in the studio, and he just couldn't break away, so I guess he needed it.
Which is a bummer, but also for Sold American fans, an exciting thing to hear. So let's dive into it. Sold American is an alternative country rock band based out of Illinois with a very interesting goal. At the beginning of their career, they wanted to combine the styles of dub and reggae music with country music, which leads to their music having this very unique atmosphere and space. And so the band's career, they were kind of elusive. There was a kind of a cult following, but their records were hard to find because they weren't re-released. Though the records were hard to find, they received high praise from musicians. Eric D. Johnson from the Fruit Bats said that seeing Sold American was one of the absolute best shows that he's seen in his life. And Jeff Tweedy from the band Wilco said in Songs I Wish I Wrote that he wished he wrote the song Before Tonight by Sold American. So with a lot of forward-thinking artists who follow their own vision, there's this trope where the rest of the world has to catch up. And that's what happened with Sold American. The band, to the public, has seemed a little inactive, but beneath the surface, they've been working on a record since 1996, 28 years in the making, and it's soon to be released upon the public. They have a new single out. It's called Sorry State. It's available on all streaming platforms. They have also released a compilation called Rise Above It, a Sold American anthology, also available on all streaming platforms. The band is touring. There's a couple dates on the site. First up is Chicago, April 17th, and then Cleveland, April 19th at Negative Space. So, anyone who has listened to this podcast has heard me yap about how great Negative Space is. Negative Space is a nonprofit art gallery in Cleveland, Superior and 38th above an Asian Market. We are hosting Sold American on April 19th. So if you want to check out this absolutely legendary band who hasn't played out in quite a while, this will be an all-around unique and special appearance, and I highly recommend, if you're going to see anything like that, to check it out at Negative Space. If you look in the link, you'll see the tickets available. So that's April 19th, Saturday, Negative Space, Cleveland, Sold American. It will be awesome. One more thing that Sold American has going on that I think you should check out. There is a book out called 35 Days of Fee. It was written by Camden Joy, who I learned I've been talking with throughout the whole process here of helping these guys get stuff settled at Negative Space. But he just put out this book on their first record, Fee, and it's a collection of 35 essays diving into it. So it's a super deep dive into the first record, and if you want to get deep, it's available on Sold American's Bandcamp, 35 Days of Fee, written by Camden Joy. Now, before we get to the conversation, I got to tell you a little bit of what I have going on. If you're new to the channel, I play in a band called C Level Letter C Dash. We are a high-energy funk-punk reggae rock group that takes 12-string acoustic guitars and runs them through Marshall amplifiers. And we've been working on a record for a long time. We have a single release coming out at the Winchester June 13th, but this is going to be a special night on many occasions. So, first occasion being the single that we're putting out is called Long-Legged Fly. It features Pete Francis from Dispatch on guitar and vocals. And for the single release party, Pete's coming to Cleveland. Pete's going to be headlining the show. It's going to be Pete Francis, us, A Song for an Unknown God, and Broctopus. And what makes this night even cooler is Pete is going to be playing some solo tunes, but he asked us to back him. So C-Level is going to be the backing band for Pete Francis. Yeah, that's going to be super wicked. So that's June 13th at the Winchester. Check out our website and all the socials for all the links on that. All right. So lastly, if you hear anything you like, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on any of the podcast platforms, that helps me keep talking to cool guests like Joe. And without further ado, this is my conversation with Joe. So the kind of get like just like a basis of your musical journey for you, Joe, where did you start?
Well, I actually started just loving music growing up, getting inspired from friends who would just give me stacks of records. And just started, I got a bass at age 15. Actually, the eve of my 15th birthday, I decided that's what I wanted because I was so into music. and I started playing the records. And then I got into cover bands. And I remember a friend growing up in school, he was already seasoned musician. I was asking him for advice, and I'm like, well, how did you get going? How did you get started? He goes, well, I just started playing other people's music until I started coming up with things myself. I found that pretty inspiring. It's like, oh, so it isn't like a, impossible hurdle. You just try to take it as you go. And I got into like this country cover band because my mother played country music. She wrote country music. And she told me, I'll get you the bass, but you have to take lessons. And because I had a brother who, he took lessons and then he would quit.
Was it bass
Like
that your brother
whatever.
would quit?
No, it was a guitar. It was a trump. And so I'm sorry, I'm going into a
Oh
heavy
no,
deep.
no, no. Sorry, no, it's good. Was it an upright bass? Are we talking, or is it just like an electric bass?
It was an electric bass. It was a Fender Precision used, but a great bass to start on. And so I got into this country cover band because my mother was kind of like I said, slightly overseeing, me being serious and not just, quitting. So she took me over to this local band's house and they played country music. I auditioned in like this front porch area. It took about 20 minutes and they asked me to join the band. And they were like in their 40s and stuff. But,
That
and I,
Bill Boyer in the Country
yes,
Flames? Okay.
yeah. And I'd heard a lot of country radio growing up through my mother. So I remember them going, well, the chords of this song, or they give me the chords. I go, oh, I think I've heard this one. And slowly I learned their set lists, kind of the hard way on the spot. And so that really got me into playing with other musicians. And then, a series of high school bands, basement bands, and then fresh out of high school into a local cover band that was pretty popular. And that I got a lot of experience that way. And I was getting paid for it as well. I was in a country band too, but so that kind of springboarded me into playing music, you know.
So, I mean, it's a really unique kind of like starting experience, like kind of having a songwriter in the house and kind of seeing the original like aspect of it, because it's a different journey I feel than like the kind of academic route. Or, and I'm sure as you discovered whilst playing through bands, like at the cover route, and like it's kind of like this longing of wanting to leave a mark to be kind of covered, at least for myself, you know what I mean? And you're trying to figure out how do all these songs work, and like I think there's probably no better way than on the job like that and trying to like just make
Yeah,
it fit.
yeah, and it was quite inspiring that my mother was writing music. I thought I was fascinated by it. Although I wasn't like a huge fan of country music at that time, it hit me later because I grew up on it, but it was just really cool. She had like a reel to reel tape player, microphones. I'd come home from school, and walk in. She'd play me what she was working on that day. And I just thought it was so cool.
That is
And
like, so is that what it looked like? Would she like when you would get home from school, she would like show you a song she wrote, or did you kind of like see her like kind of get caught up with an idea and try to work it out?
well, it was a little of both, but I will say she would usually have something recorded with a bunch of reverb on it, her strumming a guitar and singing. And she had, they called them loudspeakers back then. And she would play it, and it would just be so cool, and just the reverb on it. And I thought that would be a really cool thing to do. And I even kind of walked around the neighborhood going, yeah, I'm writing a new song. Because I guess I was trying to emulate my mother as a songwriter, but I was just making up little tunes in my head, but wasn't necessarily writing songs. I mean, I'm in middle school at this point, but
But that's like when it, those ideas start to, to know that it's an outlet and you can do it. It's like a really cool.
Yeah,
Like I've talked with a lot of
it's
people, but I don't think I've ever met someone who said their mother was a songwriter. So that's a really unique upbringing with that.
yeah. As I got older, I totally agreed with what you're just saying there. It was very cool to have that. It's like a homespun way of getting into, you know, the business, I guess. But yeah.
With with like listening to like these tunes your mom was writing, was it like I guess to kind of, was it making sense like how she was structuring things, or was this kind of like a later discovery, like, oh, I see, like how that all worked?
Well, yeah. I mean, I wasn't technically inside of it, but you know, country music, three song or three chords and the truth, was something you could latch onto when you're younger. And she did have a similar vein and style of, the way she presented her music, like I guess we all do in a sense. Uh, so I wasn't necessarily totally understanding what she was doing, but things had a similar vein enough to where, I started to catch on, I
Okay.
guess.
Yeah. I find that so fascinating. That's so cool. And like, would you ever like, I mean, would you ever share songs you wrote with your mom, and would she critique? Was there like songwriting, like, oh, move the verse here or put that on the four chord, or like any like things like that?
Well, I wasn't really that open about what I was writing, although when I did get a little older, probably once we started making albums, I would bring them home to her and she would listen to them and she might make comments. Uh, and another thing was when I was 15, she's doing all her music still. She did it really up until her death. But she would bring out your bass and your amp and play my songs. And she would even have a couple of her friends over sitting on the couch, and he's learning good, isn't he? And, I'd be sitting there playing, but I wanted to learn so bad. I just thought that was I just wanted to learn. So you have me trying to play a Rush song, which pretty impossible
Yeah.
guy in his room. And then you go into the living room playing for friends on the couch. And it was just kind of a strange contrast. But like I said, I just wanted to learn, eager.
But I mean, like to have the drive for it too, because like I can also see like where maybe that would be intimidating then to be like, because your mother's been writing songs for so long, to be like, I wrote the, you know what I mean, like, and like has
Right?
like this kind of like a history behind it. So I can see where that might be a little intimidating to share your the songs you guys wrote in that sense. But also I can see how that can drive you to want to like excel in it.
Mm, right. And the beauty of, being young and playing rock records in your room with your bass amp and going out and playing with my mom. I mean, heck, I thought I was a little cooler. My hair's long. I'm like, well, I like this country stuff. I like to learn, but, you know, so I just maybe thought wrongfully I was a tad above, you know, uh, what she was doing because I obviously didn't understand it well enough. But I don't know if that.
No, that makes sense. Like the kind of, because some of those things at the beginning of when you start playing and learn like music kind of come back, and I feel like there's a lot of lessons in life that are like that. You know what I mean? Like you kind of come back to those same aha moments in a way.
Yes, very true. And another thing about the ambition, I mean, she used to tell my dad and even her friends, oh, I came in and his amp was still on and he's laying with the bass on his stomach and it's kind of humming and he's asleep. Because I just go at it. Now, sometimes off the record, I was a little high and I, I played till I just got tired and fell asleep. Marijuana,
But
nothing.
it came off like you were practicing all night.
Big fat, and that looked good on me. So I guess I the test of, not quitting the instrument with that.
That's a super cool, like creatively supportive environment. Like, so I guess like in the progression of like learning bass, because one thing when I listen to the Souled American records, the one thing that really sticks out is the bass is pronounced, and the bass lines are like they're unique and they're catchy. And when did reggae music start to influence your playing?
Well, that happened shortly before I met Chris. I think the first reggae thing or album I ever bought was a Chill Out by um, Black Uhuru. I was
Okay,
just
yeah.
reading some hit magazine, and I go, well, I'm going to go buy that, and just the simplicity, the repetition, you could really sink your teeth into it. And you could actually learn those beautiful, simple bass lines. And that that really turned me on. And so I had that album, and then slowly I joined a band maybe 6 months later that Chris was in that did a lot of reggae, and then it was all over. Then I'm learning Marley and you know Peter Tosh, all the great stuff. Mighty Diamonds. That was a great education, but those guys were older than me in the band, and great keyboard player who just knew music in and out. He was a music teacher, and they would sit me down and, hey, listen to this. I was so turned on by it. It was beautiful, and they would give me records to, take into the den and just soak up, and they would be reggae records. So, and that really, when I talk about the simplicity of some of that stuff, and the way it's pronounced, and that kind of had impact on how I would approach writing a bass line in a song. Um, uh,
Yeah, no, that make because reggae music like it put the bass player highlights these chords in a very unique way that is like I think you hear kind of similar tropes in other music, but just with how the chords are structured and how the rhythm's structured, the bass kind of sticks out, which kind of makes it easier, I think, or not easier, but makes it more. It's like capitalized. It's here. Check this out. You can hear it clearly.
Absolutely, and you hear that definition in that bass, and just the melody too. There, there's a lot of rhythmic things going on. You get a whole host of things in reggae bass playing, but man, that beautiful melody. Hip hop does that, too, in certain ways.
Oh yeah, but was that the band? Was that the Uptown Rulers in which you were being introduced to this music, or was that post?
No, that was the Uptown Rulers, definitely. Now I talked about how I, uh, joined the cover bands. So from the cover bands, I got a call from that band because they knew I was a local bass player in the town that we grew up in, the Scuttlebutt, and they gave me a call. And that was a big step for me. It was like, whoa, I'm going to be moving and playing shows with strangers. It was, it was pretty exciting now, and learned so much. These guys knew music up and down, all kinds of music too. Yeah.
Well, that is a big jump to be moving somewhere new and to and to be, I mean, as eager as you were musically to take all this in, to have like any like new sources, like,
Oh,
oh yeah, that's like, I think, I think when people show you those records, it has such a different impact. And like dive and seeing someone who's already enthusiastic about the music and being like kind of guided around like the highlighted things, like check this out, you're a bass player, you're gonna love this. You know what I mean? Like there's like it's catchy. Like there's something addictive about that with someone who's like enthused about music like that. Um,
absolutely. And they're playing, their instruments in front of you and showing you. It sounds amazing. Oh, it was amazing.
So okay, so at that time, like okay, I guess before kind of jumping into the next part of everything, like with like a country kind of background and like this kind of newfound appreciation and like skill set of like reggae music, what do you think the crossover is between country and reggae musically? I guess.
Um, well, I keep using the word simplicity. The way you talked about how certain chords are laid down and then the bass can weave in and out, I think country can do that. Uh, it's a hard question. It's really the feel, though. I think they have similar feels in the laid backness of it. You know, there's all kinds of country and all kinds of reggae, but I would think simplicity and the laid back feel and that's something I need to think about.
Yeah, because I've been thinking about that like ever since diving into your guys' music and history, and I was like, it's a really like because I deeply enjoy both musics, and I'm like, what is the crossover, and like I admire like these guys hunting down this crossover, and and I definitely think like how the bass and the rhythm supports the tune, and like how like country kind of like if you can't really learn just a set country like with blues you can't learn just a set progression to like every country song. Everyone's unique to
Yeah,
whoever, and same with reggae, because I remember when I first started playing I like really loved blues music and reggae music, and I was like, how come I can't just learn the reggae progression? Oh, that's because there's you know what I mean, like there's little tropes
that,
that you see but never, not just like a formula.
that is so. I will say, when I truly went head over heels in with country, and that's just around the time of the uptown town rulers. Just alone on my own, it was like a Hank Williams, a stripped down kind of a country, and that was the kind of country my mother played. And she would have it on country radio, and we'd have to wake up and go to school with that stuff. You'd hear Hank Williams, singing and be like, "Oh, turn that buzzsaw off." But it was that simple country, even though there's a lot of complexities in the way the Drifting Cowboys played. And um, but I think that was where I kind of entered country and took it from there. Into the '70s where it got electric, and then you know, now I'm going to shows in the '80s. My now wife was dragging me to people like Clint Black, George Jones, and so you just start learning more and more. But I really did start from like the Hank Williams thing, and Chris was he knew I liked that, so he goes, "Well, you got to hear Jimmy Rogers," and he turned me on to Jimmy Rogers, and then I was just crazy over that stuff.
Yeah, it's always the dive deeper, because was it didn't Hank cover Jimmy Rogers, the Yodel Blues, or like was that just like his own tune, a tip of the
Well,
hat? I can't remember.
I'm not sure, but I'm not sure about specifics. If he covered Jimmy Rogers, I'm not. Hmm. But it's just amazing stuff.
But yeah, but no, like I definitely agree. Like with Hank Williams and like Jimmy Rogers and some of the cats like that, like the I guess what the honka tonk or whatever the
Yeah,
subgenre, what like it's very like there's songwriting wise is like it sounds like it's such a simply written song until you try to write one like it. You know what I mean? Like, um,
St. Patrick's.
um, so okay, because there is a quote from, or no, a mission statement. Morphine Hank or Marley Fiend Hank from I think one of your guys' early records or first cassettes. Can
Mhm.
you explain Marley Fiend Hank?
Well, we've been talking about country and reggae and possibly fusing them. I think we really felt like it sounded that way where we fused it. And it was just one of that fun process where you're in the studio and you just try to name something and you pull something out of the hat out of the blue. And I think Chris came up with Marley Fiend Hank. You're Bob Marley, and you know, I know Hank had back problems, and he had his problems with painkillers. So I think it was something of that nature, just that newness of it. And that is on. It opens Sunny, the same song. I think we just renamed it, which is our fourth album, by the way. It's on there, but it's also on Flubber, I think, right? Marley Fiend Hank. I don't have my list in front of me. Called it Marley Fiend Hank, and then we kind of started our fourth album with it, which is one with a lot of covers on it, a lot of country things, and so. But yeah, that was just a fun thing you do as a band, where you just try to brainstorm and soak up the feeling of what you've been doing and name something. It wasn't like super heavy or anything.
Well, it's funny because like sometimes the things that like are unintentionally like, oh, it's just the thing that kind of because you're trying to find like the elevator pitch for yourself, so you can kind of like explain what are we doing here, you know what I mean, like, and in the long van rides or whatever, pitching stuff back and forth. But like, okay, I was wondering if maybe that had something to do with the band Morphine as well, because they got the kind of like low, like
He
kind
was
of low
awesome.
rock. Yeah.
We knew a little bit about them. I mean, we would kind of see them in clubs we were playing early on, and we also knew uh, friends of ours, just huge fans of Morphine. I mean, I don't know the catalog all that well, but boy, just the feel and all is just superb. Yeah. But no, it didn't really have anything to do with the band Morphine. It had to do more about Hank Williams and his bad back, I guess, and then Bob Marley. That's the way we fused that title.
Like it's interesting because like with Bob Marley and like with Hank Williams, you have two of these like renowned like songwriters in their own right, and like it's one thing I've always like with like reggae music or like I feel like it kind of doesn't get the like kind of view of how heavy those lyrics and like some of the political things they're speaking about
Hmm.
are in a way, because it's kind of coded with the like good time vibe. And I think with country music to some degree as well.
Yeah, wow. That's a really good observation. I agree with that totally. It's more like, hey, we're all here to have a good time, but there's some depth of sadness and like you say, the political aspects and what people go through in life. I think they both address that kind of music does.
So okay, so at this point you're 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 going back into like this kind of Hank Williams deep dive. When do you guys focus and do Sold American?
Okay, well, it's not long after that. Although so I'm in the Hank Williams deep dive. Chris does introduce me to Jimmy Rogers. And then I sort of have this thing where I go to Minneapolis for 11 months because all throughout the Uptown Rulers, we knew this other band who I just fell in love with their music, and they wanted me to play with them. And I said, well, I love your music, and I think it's something I want to do. So I went to Minneapolis for like 11 months, played this excellent music. It was a piano player. It was just a whole hybrid of rock and roll with piano. He even had ragtime elements, but it was like hammered and hard and electric, and I had a great time there. But all I knew was nobody played country music at all there. there's one guy I met, and he was kind of in the circle of friends. He goes, "Hey, I have a Patsy Cline tape." I go, "Bring it over, bring it." And I would like play country tapes and stuff, but I'm like, I just don't belong here. And also, the piano player, songwriter, singer I admired was just so far ahead in songwriting, and it was just like, wow, I want to do what you do. And then Chris was in Chicago, wanting to start Sold American, and I was like, oh. And we just had this connection with country and reggae, all that stuff that we kind of came up with through the years, and I knew that's where I belonged. It was only an 11-month detour, but and that's when it started. And that was I got there in '86, and I was there with bells on, ready to, you know, play with Chris and be partners, co-write, do what we were going to do, and so that's '86 when it really came to a head, and I knew where I belonged. And they were so happy to have me, which was great.
Well, and so okay, so like, and like, I mean, it definitely takes that kind of stepping aside, the kind of like, and being in the wrong thing, or going out there and failing at the one thing. Not that that was an attempt you failed at, but just like in general, like trying something you're not 100% sure with and going for it, and then realizing that, this isn't where I want to be, or I want to strive to be like writing my own songs like this guy is. You know what I mean? Like, and you only learn that from going out there. And as a bass player, you're the most wanted commodity ever. So like,
everyone needed one. I mean, even when I'm talking those guys in their 40s, I'm 15. They're like, "Well, Joe, play," yeah,
yeah.
every, so not a bad place to start if you want to play music and the bass.
So when you got back, Chris already kind of had a band together that was Sold American, or had a group of guys working on stuff, or when you got back, you and Chris compiled a group.
Pretty much the latter there, because we both knew a really great drummer, and I had jammed with him back in the Uptown Rulers just when we'd be up in Chicago. Well, Jamie. And we just had a great connection. We would play all kinds of reggae dub and stuff. Just sitting there as a rhythm section, he'd invite me over. So I'm like, I want to play with that guy. That be our drummer. And Chris, when I got there, had known Scott Tuma a little bit and had been kind of trying to develop and play with him because he really thought he had something. And Scott was, somewhat kind of starting out on the guitar, but Chris really saw something in him. And so when I got there in '86, Jamie is in Chicago, and he's happy to play with us. Although he was playing in another band, I was like, man, we should do this. So the way the story kind of goes is Chris always says, "Well, you got Jamie and I got Scott." So, but nothing was really all together once I got there. It just started to develop. And I started jamming with Scott once I got there too. And I started to see his brilliance. And we were kind of feeding off each other, like, because we'd play guitars together. And he just had a phenomenal approach that was, well, you talked about the schooled thing. It was like outer space or something. It was like something you really couldn't learn.
Yeah. Oh, and it's kind of cool that both you guys kind of like had this kind of musical connection or insight with someone else and kind of brought it to the group. So like at that point, is like Chris, or are you pitching songs and like, or are you just kind of working on covers, or is it all just kind of like a jam? And then like, we got to put lyrics to this, or.
Well, it was kind of a mixed bag, but really, both Chris and I truly wanted to like write songs with lyrics and melodies. And, we were striving toward that. And we were kind of beginners in a sense, although we both wrote stuff in Bloomington. and the rulers. Um, but there was so much jamming with all four of us. We just, there was this warehouse Chris acquired, and he let us all set our stuff up in it, and we would just jam all the time. And that's what I was doing anyway. I'm going from Minneapolis. I remember playing with just out of boredom, when the piano band wasn't playing, it'd be like, well, you want to jam with this guy? Sure. And I'll bring you along. And so I was just so accustomed to just trying to collaborate, if you will, with just other musicians. And so we were all on full jam mode, by the time we convened in Chicago, and we would bring in songs we were writing too. A good example of that is on Flubber. It's a song called "Why Are You." We were just in jam space, and we're just chugging away that groove. And then the next day, Chris writes some lyrics, comes back. We chug that groove, and he starts singing this melody he wrote. And so it was a mixed bag. But yeah.
What, like, was there a point in which, like, this kind of, like, early development that you guys, like, kind of knew, okay, this is it? Like, we can take on, like, and support these kind of ideas.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we felt confidence. We had swagger, and I mean, not 100%, because you never really know until you try. But yeah, we really thought we were at a command of what we wanted to do, and we're learning at the same time. But yeah.
Okay, so at that, so as you guys are writing and compiling stuff, are you gigging at all?
Yeah.
Okay, and
In fact, I'm sorry. Keep going.
Oh no, I was gonna say. And so is it like bar gigs, like original gigs, like what type of like at this moment, like at this kind of early stage, where are you guys like playing?
Well, there were bar gigs, but there were also like eventually like the Cabaret Metro and uh, some pretty big clubs in Chicago because there was some decent reception. And that's interesting you say that because like the first couple of records were because the result of playing a lot of gigs while doing what was described in the warehouse. So, so we were able to set up early on in the first couple albums and play things live in the studio. I mean, the first album's essentially live with some overdubs, and I mean, not all the vocals are live, but yeah, a lot of gigs. No huge things we would open for people. It eventually we would headline, but kind of fizzled out at some point.
Yeah. So okay, so and I think that's kind of like an important like part of getting to the record, right? Is that the gigs led to it. Like by playing out, did you guys did you record all like a fee on your own, or was this like were you brought in with like a record company with that?
Well, we had the songs for fee and then some, but we kind of went and they called them demos back then. We were like, hey, if this is good enough, it'll be the album. But this was not a record company thing. This was like getting some money together and some connections. And we drove to East Haven, Connecticut, for like, that is in Connecticut, I hope. And for like a week. And we laid down so many of the songs that are on the first two albums. And it was cold in the studio, and there's some really good versions, but and that's the tape I think that got shopped around to where Rough Trade did the first album. They signed us, and then we recorded it after they signed us, the one that became the album. And another, what a great thing to do, because I remember hearing the tapes from East Haven and uh, then the tapes from the actual album, and I'll speak for myself, hammering everything so hard, just dynamics are almost non-existent compared to the actual album itself. So that was another great stepping stone to uh, get that first album out. But no, we did that first thing on our own. And then we went to South by Southwest, even though Rough Trade kind of were pretty interested in us. And then they saw us play live, and then they signed us, and we recorded the first album. And we were so seasoned by already doing it once, and then all the jamming and playing live.
It definitely, like, when you have time to kind of fine tune and stretch out songs and like let them take their form, it's like a completely different thing than if it has to be like, okay, final draft is due now, homework's done tomorrow.
And that's kind of, in a way, we always work that way. It was like, hey, we'll know when we think we have it. I know that's arrogant, but hey, you got to have that swagger, like I mentioned earlier.
Well, right. Well, also like turning something in half baked, or not or overcooked, and I don't know. There's like
Yeah.
there's a middle ground for things to be just right, and like you guys only know that for your work,
Mm-hmm.
What before kind of leaving Fee is what does Fee, where's like that title coming from?
Okay, well, it's really short for feel. Um, and when we talk about the reggae, Bob Marley, we heard him say it in some interview, but this is like in the '80s, early '80s. He just said, "It's the fee, man. It's the fee." And Chris kind of latched onto that, so that it kind of came from that, and we really use that same philosophy today. It's like it's the feel of the song. We really want to try to capture that in a genuine way, and that's where that came from, Fee. And I think it's the perfect first name for the album there. So.
Definitely, like, because I was getting music nerdy about it, trying to figure it out. I'm like, okay, maybe it's like solfege for like a flat four. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that means it's the dominant, the tritone. That's what they mean.
I like where you're going. We always got symbol for, we always got that. Fe is the symbol for iron. Fe,
Oh,
which,
okay.
but that isn't really where it came from. But hey, the more the merrier on that.
So before leaving Fee, through putting together and promoting this show, I met this guy named Camden, who I guess wrote a book on Fee, and
Yes.
he when I was talking with him, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna talk with Joe. What's a good question you think? And he wanted to know, when you listen back to that record, what do you guys hear now? Are you happy with how Fee turned out?
Yes. I mean, you could just hear we're spinning our wheels in the mud. I mean, we're just so eager, and I always liked the sound of that album. Chris early on kind of, and some of the other guys, they were like, well, it's a little, a lot of compression, and but I always liked the sound of it. I know this is probably confusing a little bit, but Chris grew to love it because we heard it like maybe a year ago. Camden Joy, who is Tom Edelman. Did I just let the cat out of the bag? I don't know if you know that.
Nope, I
It's
don't.
Tom. That's
Okay. Cool.
Told you, but so yeah, we like it now, definitely. I mean, we revisited all the albums uh, about a year ago. Once Tom, aka Camden, started to want to work with us and help us out and try to reignite some of this stuff. And he did write that 35 Days of Fee. And that's when we started listening to all the albums again. And we feel pretty good about them. I mean, I guess the anthology came out of that, which was a Tom thing. That's something he wanted to put together.
So like I guess because also it's like one of those I find like if I have to listen there's this like when you record it and when you put it down in wax and you're like okay this is it. You've heard it so many times at that point it's almost like kind of burnt into your brain and you can only kind of hear the minor hiccups and stuff and like you kind of get a little too tunnel vision. And I find like when you step back and like a year later, if you can listen to it and not like wince, like you've done something good. So hopefully
So
that was your guys' experience.
it was put that into words really well because things like, yeah, but that's also a testament to how hard you work to get it right, at least at the top of your mind. So, yeah, I agree with all that.
So with like I guess going to the next record, Flubber, with like the idea of like not liking as much compression and such, is that kind of what led to like the different tonalities found on that record, or was it just like new space, new studio, new tunes?
Well, you're very observant there because that was part of the philosophy for trying to shed some of that stuff and just get more real sounds. So, yes, that was a conscious thing. And Brian Deck, who we worked with on the next record with Jeff and us, he he accommodated all that. He knew what we wanted and every step of the way. But yeah, we really wanted to kind of not do the compression thing as much or hardly at all. I think it's only on a couple of bass lines that we had to save because they weren't fitting in the mix right. But yeah, it's pretty sans all that stuff. Just real sounds with good microphones and that's the way Chris has always loved to record. He always a little more loose about certain things, but I only grew to find that's a beautiful way to do it. I mean, I was learning. We all were learning, but yeah.
At that point, or I guess up until that point, did Chris have a little more like recording experience?
Um. Well, we all like even in the cover band I did. We would record. I was in a studio or two. Um. We were, somewhat neck and neck on the recording experience. And the Uptown Rulers did some things in the studio too. Um, but no, I think he had more of a vision, sonic vision, than I did. I worked in the trenches where it came to more of a, I want to see how these parts, these melodies fit together as puzzle pieces. And he's more well, he has all that too, but he's thinking of the sonics and oh, that sounds overwrought. And look, I'll just like that sounds like college rock. Just this, I'd be like, what? I think it sounds great. It was never a real. We never had a you know uh, fights about things like that, but he did have way more of a sonic vision than I ever had. And I thought I was learning more and more as time went on about the vision he was, putting out there.
It's interesting because like as a musician, you kind of like fall into like the funnel of like does the take sound performance wise right, or right for what I want it to be. Like like at least I should say I get caught up in very much performance aspects of recording where I'm like, wow, I hit that note just a little weird. Let me go back in and punch it in. You know what I mean? Like where like does it alter the sonic feel of it? Maybe not. Would anyone else in the world notice? No, but you know what I mean. So I relate to where you're coming from in that sense. Like maybe having more of the focus on like the performance aspect
Yeah,
of it,
yeah.
and then like
And
learning the sonic field later.
yeah, I like what you said there. I agree with it. We all had our focuses. We all kind of excelled in different areas, which was good for a band. It's how you make a complete thing. And but yeah, the take's really important, and that's what you strive for.
Right, right. So okay, so after like these two records, are you guys touring at this point? Are you still like are you opening for acts around then, or is it still kind of like this mixed bag of gigs?
It's a bit more of a mixed bag, but these first two were still kind of doing the opening thing. I mean, I believe we opened for like the Pogues at a Vic.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
epic.
it was. Um,
Was was Joe Strummer in the band at that time? Like, no, that would
no,
have been
he
way later.
in the band. He
Oh,
was in '87. See, I am kind of blurring the timeline here a little, but yeah, he was actually replacing who the guitar player was. Yeah,
oh,
and
sick.
yeah, it was pretty amazing. But that was seven.
Did you get like?
I'm sorry about.
But anyway, did you get to like kick it with the Pogues at all? Were they
Well,
cool?
I was kind of out in the crowd watching the whole thing, but the other guys were backstage and they met them all, and uh, so yeah, Chris, yeah, he's not here, but he could tell you a few things. I do remember this. I do remember, like on the first song, I'm doing a bass intro, and I kind of look behind me, and Joe Strummer standing there behind my head.
So sick.
I'm like, oh my god, that's Joe Strummer. I don't know if something piqued his interest on it to go out and listen, but that was pretty surreal.
Yeah. I would not be able to play the same without thinking Joe Strummer might be lurking in the shadows. Like,
It was all
that's so. Then is the third record kind of like already in your guys's can of like songs like around the horn? Like, do you guys have after like because it the first few kind of like are right back to back, or the first three are like right back to back. So are those tunes like in the can? Are you guys rehearsing or crafting those throughout this whole process?
yeah, all three came out in 18 months, the first three, and things were always being written. Like, for instance, we talked about Fee. I was writing the song Around the Horn for the third album during the sessions of Fee, like after sessions. I mean, that's how bustling we were. So uh, things are not in the can, but they're written. Some things are. Another good example on Flubber, we were trying to get this song recorded, and it just wasn't working. And so depressed. And, after doing it session after session and go, we got to drop this. Well, I go home and I write a song that's going to be on the third album. And then I showed to the guys, but nothing's in the can. They were kind of recorded back to back to back. We just tried to compile, the right group of songs. Yeah.
So with like I guess with your writing process, is it kind of we have this idea that we came up with as a group? Do you like kind of get like a song bug, like a little like a lick or a progression and kind of take like and take it as a inspiration as it comes, or do you kind of have like a okay, I need to work some things out and like set aside time to like just like kind of like do the song craft away?
Well, I think earlier on it was more of a mixed bag where um, I would get inspirations from what we were jamming on. We're all, like I said, all that stuff. But as time went on, even Chris, I think we were just both coming up with songs at home and putting them down and showing them to the other guys. And so that's what it became probably around the third album.
Okay, so but at the third album, there's kind of like okay, there quote unquote kind of like system for the
In a
band a little
sense,
bit.
yes, definitely. Uh, and that's how we grafted that whole way of working together through all those years. And I think we found what worked best. And I remember just thinking, well, the dust is settling. We did those three albums in 18 months. I think we're still recording the third album when I'm thinking this, but we were kind of like not convening in the jam space as much. We would spend a couple of weeks at home and come back and show each other what we had. All four of us. Yeah, around that time. So that'd be 1990, I guess.
So there was kind of a little bit of space in between. So with like Sunny with like the more covers kind of
Mhm.
on that, like was that kind of the dust settling in
Yes.
a sense and still trying to keep everything
And it
okay,
was
okay, okay.
also some interest was dwelling and shows were dwelling or, just dwindling. Sorry, wrong word. And Sonny actually, I remember it was like New Year's Eve of, I guess it was 1991. And Chris was going back to Chicago. I was visiting my parents, but he came by in the van and we drove around the block and just said, man, we got to record something. Um, why don't we just do a single, pick a couple of songs, do a single, go into a Brian Deck studio and do a single. I was like, okay, that's cool. That was the plan. And then we got in there, we recorded a couple of songs, and things were feeling so amazing. We just started adding stuff. And since they are covers, I mean, they weren't covers that were just pulling out of the hat. I mean, they were things we kind of not goofed around on, but played through the years. And it just started to form into an album. And then there were some things added, you know, like Chris added Rock That Cradle Lucy, kind of like in the home stretch. Again, we took it home, came up with parts, reconvened in the studio. And we were also working uh, to get studio money. We had jobs like at the Chicago Theater, painting walls and things. And we get the money up, we go in for another round of sessions. And that gave us time to think too. How do we want to shape this thing? Yeah.
So that's a yeah, because like just to keep it going on your own terms and everything it's a uphill battle and to like have it, but that kind of have it like where you're going in with these tunes like you've kind of grown up with and like kind of welded together. I gotta imagine that had a sense of like kind of all right, we're doing like it's easier. You know what I mean? Like there's a little ease to it.
Yeah, because you have this ingrained familiarity and also that's kind of part of the inspiration for the title of it. Like we're just the sons. We've learned this stuff, Sonny. So, and I think that was a Chris thing as well. That title, but it worked.
Yeah. Was it and I guess so you recorded some of your mom's tunes, right?
Well, on Sonny, are you talking about that album or just through the other? Yeah.
Well, it's through multiple records, but I don't know when the first one
The first
was.
one was Around the Horn. It was called Holding Back the Tears. And then on Sunny, which is the next album, uh, it's an instrumental. It's the very last song, but it has lyrics. It has a vocal melody. I tried to sing it just endlessly. Could not nail it. Could not get it. Chris even tried it, but we're both like, this music is so overwhelming. We just put the music on and ride the album out into the sunset. And so those were the first two that we did of hers. And then, well, then the next album, I kind of heard her playing her piano one day when I'm visiting. And again, I have the bass on because she wants me to play with her. and and we really, and there's a whole other side story where my sister's a musician and she plays accordion, and she got the same treatment I did. My mom always wanted her to play her songs and, come on, jam with me. But, and I just heard her playing something one day, and it was a beautiful melody. And I go, are you going to do something with that? Or do you care if I kind of mess around with it? And she was just playing away. She wasn't even sure what I was talking about. She goes, no, go ahead. I wrote this song called Sit Down, which is on Frozen. It's the second song. And so she's totally responsible for that song. And then I wrote words to it and a second part. So that's a co-written song. And then on the last album, we do one of her songs from the mid to late '90s called what is that called? All My Friends. Yeah. So I guess there are 4 songs total of hers. Yeah.
Like, I gotta imagine, kind of like, aside from the even with the co-written one, kind of stepping in the shoes of like your mother's music had to be a really kind of interesting feat as or interesting feeling as
It
well.
was. It truly was. And it was she would have songs that she would write just with her guitar and her voice, and I would take the tapes. This is around the same time period of that co-written thing, and I would just put bass and guitar to it because it just made her happy. She wanted to hear it. She used to call it accompaniment. Are you going to accompany me on the bass? And yeah, okay. But so it just made her happy to have somebody interested in her music. And she would be so happy right now that people talk about it. She'd be beside herself.
Well, it's awesome music, and it's like I think that's the ambition of any musician in that sense, is to have somebody hear and kind of get emotionally invested in their kind of perspective. And I think that's really cool and special that you were able to like kind of dive into this project based on the roots of the music you liked, but also the roots of your music, and get to like sprinkle it throughout the career of it.
It is
That's
a
really cool,
special
man.
thing. I mean, that's I like the way you said that, and I truly hope to maybe do a few more down the road because she has so
Yeah.
many.
And did she get the she got to hear some of these,
She
right?
definitely heard the Holding Back the Tears on the third album. Yeah, I brought it
Yeah.
home after it got released, and she went in her room, the same room I was talking about when I was a kid with the reverb and all that, and she just put it on the turntable and listened to it probably about 7 to 10 times just over. So she was very happy about that one.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Now,
That's
say
so
the
cool.
very last one we did, she was kind of, she was blunt, but I respected it all. I don't want you to sugarcoat, but she was like, well, it's a little slow.
But I mean, okay, well, kind of on that point, like Frozen, that record, the tempo did switch. Like I feel like but I mean, I feel like with any kind of like artist in a sense, like there's an appreciation for the time that's passing and the amount of like dynamic that's put into a
Mhm.
thing. But Frozen definitely, I think, was a kind of like sonic. I wouldn't say sonic. I would just say a dynamic shift musically with you
Sure.
guys. And like I think that was like a couple of factors, right? Like with
Yes.
personnel, but what kind of brought up that choice otherwise? Was it just the best served the song? Was it like how you guys were writing them?
Well, it was. I think it had to do with the songwriting, but I will say this: when you don't have a drummer, and for some reason, the three of us like the way our guitars and bass, Scott, Chris, and I, love the way they melded together. We just didn't necessarily have an agenda to replace the drummer. We were just, this is working. We're loving this. It's sounding different. We might be growing in different directions. But I will say, the lack of drums will totally push you in um, directions. And as far as the songwriting, though, I don't know if that really had anything to do with the slowdowns or yeah. I mean, those songs probably could have been played because their melody, their chords, their, parts that intertwine. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. It's very interesting because like it makes this kind of atmospheric like approach like dynamic to you guys at that point, and
Mm-hmm.
like I think about the early mission statement of like or not mission statement, the early influence of like dub music, and like it kind of in its own way like does that like it because with dub music I feel like it puts you in this like space where things are a little timeless even though they're gridlocked in a way, and like I think that almost kind of returns to form in a sense.
Wow. That's a huge compliment. And I will say this, there's that, having all that basis when you're young, and then it kind of starts to breathe once you start to spread your wings in certain directions. So dub, yeah, I think that sensibility was totally like not lost there in our minds. Um, Tried to explain that, but
No, that makes like that's dub music is like it's something of its own like world. Like when I talked with this guy Mark Stewart. Are you familiar with his work?
I'm not sure. No, I don't know. Does he play in a band or is he just an artist?
Yeah, no, he played in a bunch of groups, but he was kind of a dub guy, and
No, I'm
like
not familiar.
he okay, he said like he we were talking about dub, and like he has this whole philosophy, and it kind of really shifted my perspective on dub. That dub is life. You're taking bits from all these different aspects of your life and putting it into this present moment. And I was like, whoa, that's like a really like kind of like heavy and free way to feel and think of dub music, because it quite literally is taking all these different things and putting them together.
Uh,
Um,
that's
but that's why
great
like
description. Yeah. Uh,
yeah, yeah. But I think with what you guys were doing at this point really kind of like harpened back to that.
yeah, and we were all had in our lives. We were having certain feelings of loss, and that was could have even been why we just said, "Look, I'm not gonna like get another drummer. We're just gonna play our music because it just feels so right, and it, we're in our space." And when you do talk about dub, it's just those snippets, ones that surface, ones that bob down, ebb and flow. I mean, I think that sensibility was definitely there.
Yeah, it's like good no having that kind of like view on it makes it like a whole different at least from my perspective, like after, like I like to listen to everything, then kind of do some research and listen again, and like everyone's got their own ways, but diving into the last two records in that sense, like I was like, whoa, I get it. I think I get it. I get it for me. And that's what everyone can take away from any any piece of music.
Well, that was for us because even when we're recording those last two, we're going, "Oof, I hope people are patient with this. It just feels right, but man, it doesn't. It, it's a little strange sounding, and is anybody going to like this? And that isn't your sole reason for doing something, but it's, it amazes us that people do like those to this day. They really cite those last two albums because they have this cohesion.
So like, so you guys are kind of having this thought as you're like recording these records, and you're at this point, are you playing the songs out like that as well, or is it like after the recording of all this stuff that you're like kind of audience testing some of this?
We're definitely going for the recordings, and it, it's a process. So in the process, you sit around and think about what you're doing, and well, that's how we always made records. But I will say the first 18 months, there isn't as much time to think.
When you, because I read a review on a show you guys did with by the guy from the Fruitbacks. Why can't I think is
Johnson, because I did.
Eric Eric D. Johnson. Yeah, yeah. And he mentioned at one point how you guys had the venue turn off all the lights, except for, and even tried for the exit sign, but they couldn't do it. So like musically, you kind of create this atmosphere, and as you're like going around and play, as you're like gigging it, is that something? Was that like a trope you guys would do at shows to kind of try to create that full feel for the audience, or was this just like experimenting and seeing like what you guys can get away with type deal?
It was, well, I'll be really honest with you. I mean, at times with certain stage lights, certain colored stage lights, it would be like, that's kind of, I don't know, that frequency isn't right. I'm not trying to get all heavy on you. So I would go, damn, that light's bright. And Chris, was at the helm. He just said, hey, could you turn that light out? Because it's, in so many words, freaking this guy out over here. And so it was not planned. It was just him taking care of me. And, we did it a few times in certain shows. And I do remember Scott, the guitar player, just saying certain times there'd be a black light in in the back of the stage or something. He was feeling the frequencies of that black light. And so we just started messing with lights on that level of, well, maybe if we turn that red light out, it wouldn't. It was just kind of seat of your pants thing, but we're just trying to get comfortable on stage. And yeah.
Yeah, because like I mean, there's like a whole like recording wise, it's kind of like a strange environment. Like it's kind of like this laboratory of sense. Like you're trying to take the thing you do so naturally and like put it underneath the microscope of your perception of perfection. You know what I mean? Like, and then to kind of take it from room to room, it's almost like in a weird way trying to recreate the feel and like the precision, and like it's like trying to make the feel and the science experiment happen at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting with the lights because and that may be like my kind of audio like early perception of just kind of never really thinking about it, but that definitely helps the audience kind of dive into what you're leaning into.
Well, I like the way you look at it, because in some ways people pay money to see a show and you say, turn the lights out. It's almost like, wait a second. And see I mean, so many thoughts go through one's heads, but that was really him just trying to take care of the band. Chris saying, turn that light out, turn that. And nothing planned, nothing read into it. It just kind of happened on that level. Yeah. I already said it once, but I guess.
Yeah. So I guess so after that point, like did just as far as like with this next record that's been in the
Mhm.
works, um like what kind of like has been like the like after like this record, and did this everything just kind of slow down with the three of you guys and just kind of go on hiatus type situation, or what kind of like led to like the longer pause between then and I guess now?
Okay, well, I'm not.
Sorry, I know it's
Oh,
a big gap.
what a great question. I'm not going to blame that on, us losing our guitar player, but, he had to do what he had to do, and he put out so many records on his own. But the time, and that's a long time, quarter century plus, Chris and I, we're down to two. We're trying to, maybe keep our feelers out for people that can play with us, but we really had a period of reconstruction where it was like, we're going to record alone until we have some form of, spark. Perhaps somebody else can come in, but and it was just a process of, well, now we need to learn to just play together, you know, two of us. And so that reconstruction was like, well, we were really like adamant about uh, recording live, just the two of us with the principal tracks of the song. We're like, we just want to do this live and get that feel. And well, that was a whole new process because we did sit in the room with guitars through the years, but to really actually do that on a record and get the take like we're talking about, um, it was, we had to go through so many different formations. After a while, it was just like, look, maybe the songwriter who was going to lay the song down, I'll overdub to you. Let's try that. That took a span of time. We're doing our own engineering because we're kind of in a remote studio, although uh, our tech guys, Clark and Jeff Hammond, they would drive down 200 miles because we were in this house um, in Charleston, just the two of us. So we had to do, they drive down, but it was like you can't have them drive down all that often. They come down there to just dial the knobs and then leave. And so we had to try to learn how to engineer ourselves in a big way. And that was a whole other host of problems. Almost sounds like I'm making excuses, but that took time. And then we actually squeezed the blood out of the songs that we were doing at that time to try to follow up to Notes Campfire. That we were like, oh my God, we have all these expectations of these songs and we're recording alone. And it's just, why don't we just write some new songs that we don't have so much pressure on us to capture perfectly? And then we wrote a whole new batch of songs, and that's pretty much what's on the new record. And that was another span of years because we were in between studios here and there. We did get back up to Chicago, thanks to Chris. And so the new record is like a second draft of all new songs, and we found a way to do it. And getting back up to Chicago, we had more technical assistance, and we were feeling pretty confident because we figured out how to play together again. It was almost like boot camp after Nodes Campfire for the two of us because we're alone now. So
So with the kind of like learning to play together again, what were some of like the things that were like, this is, I guess lessons of doing that? Like, was it feel? Was it like, uh, I guess just, I mean, I gotta imagine it would be feel, but, or note choice, or like, you know what I mean? Like, how did it kind of, because you guys have been playing together
I
for a
know.
long time, so to kind of have to relearn this, like, what was like, what was the lessons or the difference from before until now.
Well, I will say, like, we both had our problems. Like, me playing an entire song through with a guitar itself, not a bass. There's drums to latch onto with a bass. There's just us. But, I had problems with consistency playing a guitar. Um, we do take after take, and it's just you hear the flaws like a sore thumb, and it would be like, you gotta fix that. And then Chris had his own, problems here and there, how we would meld. And so I had to learn how to play guitar better, and he had to learn how to play without another guitarist that was of the stature that he had, because they would form in a beautiful core, him and Scott, and he didn't have that anymore. And I didn't have a drum. We were Sans drummer for quite a while, but so there's no excuse there. But yeah, so we had to actually try to meld with our styles of guitar playing um, in a real way to where, and that took a lot of time as well. That's why I called it boot camp and reconstruction and all that stuff, the keywords.
No, that yeah, that makes sense because like when a guitar player plays bass, you kind of know, and vice versa. But also like to have that kind of void and like this kind of follow up vision, I can see where that reconstruction in that kind of boot camp and just
Mhm.
the kind of like new philosophical approach.
Yeah, yeah. The philosophy shifts a little bit because you're working with, what you made the decision to work with, and it's not what it used to be. It's different. Yeah.
Um, so like a tune like "Sorry State" is that kind of like I guess a new like what the record's kind of leaning towards, like a new feel, or is that kind of a one off of what's been done?
Well, it kind of has our stamp on it, but it is kind of a newish. What the new record? It's very much along the lines of the songs. Um, it's you know I called Flubber, I mean Flubber. I called Around the Horn. I called Notes Campfire. I called that the Blob. Uh, that was our nickname for it because it was just this big thing. Well, we didn't want to do that again. And then doing two different sets of songs kind of took us on a path of a more like Sorry State. Yeah. Um, it, you'll probably hear that the cohesion of it, but I would say that's pretty fair statement that the album sounds more like that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, I mean that makes sense because it's like this kind of redraft of yourselves and like of expectations of kind of what to live up to, and like because I really like that song "Sorry State," so I'm excited for
This
what's going to be in the
song,
new
I love
batch.
it. Yeah, yeah. For
Which kind of takes us to today. So Chris is like kind of caught in the moment of really getting something kind of locked in. So I guess with like this recording of this record, was it kind of like that? Because like I gotta imagine like recording, like there's so many things that go into to capturing a good recording aside from performance. And as a musician, I'm very tunnel visioned to the performance aspect of it. But if I had to be like, this is actually out of phase, you know what I mean? Or like, oh, I didn't know you can put the mic next to this, or you know what I mean? Like, there's so many things
all
like
that.
that. Um, yeah.
That's what we lacked down when we started in that house. The two of us. That's what we lacked. Just that knowledge of, or just even like the options of doing something because we're just throwing mics on things, trying to make them work. And um, but yeah, we really learned from all that, and we got it together, and we have a great guy named Clark Hayes, who is an amazing engineer. His knowledge of music, he's been in the business for years, and that just threw it over the edge. Him, given, and Jeff Hammond as well. And then, of course, Tom Edelman slash Camden Joy came in, and it just all started to flow, and just we feel so good about it.
I'm really excited for this new record, and it's like it's exciting that like even in this moment right now, you guys are still like working through stuff and trying to like actively like approach it, but like to kind of be like so in the moment, like with Chris saying he's locked in. I think that's like to the dedication to any vision, right? And to see it through like that, it's really cool. I guess my question with that is that kind of how it works, like for you guys now? If you like, is it like a weekly thing you guys are working on, like trying to knock out this record and maybe not getting somewhere, but then when it does lock in, it's kind of like we're in?
Yes, I mean we totally have that feeling when we know it's right, or it. But I will say this: it's done. I mean, the album's done, but we were just working on the very last song. I had to re-record the bass like 2 days ago, and now he's working on the vocal. But last song, out of 12, and pretty happy about all that. I was really glad to re-record that bass because it had technical problems. I mean, but so yeah, the album's pretty much done, and most of it's mixed. We just have this last song we're working on, and that's why he seized the opportunity to, finish it. So
I have so Joe, I really appreciate your time, man. This has been lovely.
well,
to pick your mind.
I look forward to meeting you, Ziggy Dave.
Likewise. Likewise, man. I have one question that I should have asked way earlier, but I didn't. So Lenny Bruce influenced the name?
Yeah, that's a Chris thing. He is 6 years older than me. I'm not using that as a crutch or excuse, but yeah, that was totally him. Like latching onto that auction thing. The Lenny Bruce thing he did, the stand up. Can I have five? Can I have it out? Sold American. Yeah, that was all him, and I loved it. I'm coming back from Minneapolis. I'm telling people in Minneapolis, yeah, it's called Soul American. I'm going to Chicago.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for your time, my friend.
It was really engaging, and you asked amazing questions, and you get it. I know you're a musician, artist. That wouldn't matter either way.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys' music and your artistry. And like I'm saying, I'm excited for you guys to check out the gallery.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.